The morning sun hadn't yet risen over the Nevada desert when Dr. Laura Bennett's life changed forever. She stood in the control room of the quantum research facility, her blue eyes fixed on the monitoring screens while her fingers danced across the keyboard. The experiment was simple, or at least, it should have been. They were testing quantum tunneling effects, nothing more dangerous than what they'd done 100 times before. Energy levels are stable, Robert Nash called out from his station. His usually neat brown hair was messy from running his hands through it too many times, a habit he had when excited. Ready when you are, Laura. She nodded, double-checking the readings one last time. Starting the sequence in 3, 2, 1. The quantum chamber hummed to life, its soft blue glow filling the reinforced testing area below. Everything was normal for exactly 43 seconds. Then the air started to crack. "Robert," Laura shouted, her fingers flying across the controls. "Are you seeing this?" Energy spike. He was already moving, trying to shut down the power. "It's not coming from our equipment. It's something else." The crack in the air grew wider, spreading like ice across a pond. But instead of white, it showed something else, a darkness deeper than night, with strange lights moving within it. The facility's alarms began to scream. "Shut it down," Laura ordered, but the emergency protocols weren't working. The tear in reality was growing on its own now, feeding off some power they couldn't see or understand. Security guards burst into the room, led by Officer Pete Miller. "Dr. Bennett, we need to evacuate now." "We can't leave," Laura protested, still trying to save their data. "If this tear keeps growing." She never finished her sentence. The first creature emerged from the breach, and all hell broke loose. It looked like Crystal and Shadow had decided to have a baby, and that baby had grown into something that shouldn't exist. Its body was translucent but dark, with edges that cut through metal like it was paper. The security guards opened fire, but their bullets passed right through it. "Get down," Robert yelled, pulling Laura behind a desk as the creature lashed out, its limbs extending like liquid glass. Where it touched the walls, the metal seemed to age and crumble in seconds. More shapes were emerging now. The breach was fully open, a wound in the world that kept bleeding these impossible things into their reality. The facility's lights flickered and died as the creatures began to feed on the electrical systems. Within 20 minutes, the military arrived. Colonel Frank Murphy led the response team. Rolling in with tanks and troops like this was a war zone. In a way, it already was. "Dr. Bennett," he called out, finding her helping Robert limp toward the exit. "I need to know what we're dealing with." Laura watched as one of the crystalline horrors absorbed an entire computer bank, growing larger and more complex. "There's some kind of interdimensional entity," she explained quickly. "They seem to feed on both energy and matter. Conventional weapons pass right through them." Murphy cursed as he watched one of his tanks being dissolved by a creature that had grown to the size of a house. "Any suggestions?" "The quantum readings showed something interesting when they first appeared," she said, her mind racing. "They have a unique energy signature, if we could find the right frequency." A soldier came running up to them. "Sir, they're spreading beyond the facility perimeter." Murphy grabbed his radio. "This is Colonel Murphy. We need immediate containment protocols. Set up a 5-mile exclusion zone. No one gets in or out without my direct authorization." Laura turned to Robert, who was nursing a burned leg where one of the creatures had brushed against him. "We need to get to the secondary lab, the one with the experimental alloy testing equipment." "Why?" Murphy asked, watching as more of his weapons proved useless against the invaders. "Because when the first creature appeared, I noticed something," Laura explained. "It avoided the titanium support beams, didn't try to feed on them at all. And look," she pointed to where one of the smaller entities was moving, carefully going around a piece of equipment they'd been using for titanium stress tests. Robert's eyes widened. The atomic structure. The quantum resonance of titanium must be incompatible with their own energy patterns. English, doctors. Murphy demanded, ducking as a piece of dissolving ceiling fell nearby. They don't like titanium, Laura simplified. It might be our only chance to fight back. The colonel nodded sharply. What do you need? Access to the lab and time, she said. Robert and I can try to weaponize this, but we need to move fast. These things are getting stronger with everything they consume. Murphy looked at the growing horde of crystalline horrors, now numbering in the dozens. They were spreading out, becoming more organized. Some had grown to enormous sizes, while others were splitting into smaller, faster forms. You've got 1 hour, he said finally. After that, we'll have to consider more drastic measures. They all knew what that meant. The facility wasn't far from where they used to test nuclear weapons. Laura and Robert worked frantically in the secondary lab while Murphy's men tried to contain the breach. They could hear the sounds of battle, if you could call it that, when only one side was taking casualties. The creatures were learning, adapting, finding new ways to consume and grow. Look at this, Robert called out, examining a piece of titanium under their strongest microscope. The atomic structure. It's almost like it's naturally tuned to disrupt their energy patterns. Laura was already running calculations. If we could find a way to enhance that effect, maybe create some kind of titanium-based weapon. The building shook. Through the lab's windows, they could see one of the largest creatures yet, rising like a tower of dark crystal against the dawn sky. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Time's up, Murphy shouted from the doorway. Please tell me you have something. Laura held up a small titanium rod they'd modified. Maybe. We've enhanced its natural properties, but we haven't had time to test it. No time like the present. Murphy grabbed the rod. How does it work? Just pointed at them. Laura wasn't entirely sure herself. This was all theoretical, based on observations and desperate science. Murphy stepped out into the hallway where one of the smaller creatures was gliding along the floor. He pointed the rod at it, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature screamed, a sound like breaking glass and tearing metal combined. Where the rod pointed, the creature's crystalline body began to crack and shatter. It tried to retreat, to phase through the walls like they'd been doing, but couldn't. In seconds, it collapsed into a pile of inert shards that quickly turned to dust. Holy shit, Robert whispered. It worked. How many more of these can you make? Murphy demanded, looking at the rod with new respect. Laura was already moving back to their equipment. With what we have here, maybe a dozen. But we'd need a lot more titanium for anything bigger. I'll make some calls, Murphy said. In the meantime, another explosion rocked the building. Through the breach, more creatures were emerging. Bigger ones, smarter ones, and they looked angry. The war for reality had begun, and humanity's only hope lay in the hands of a quantum physicist, her research partner, and a soldier holding a piece of specially treated metal. Laura looked at the breach, then at her calculations, then at the titanium rod that had proven their theory correct. We're going to need a lot more titanium, she said quietly. Above them, the sun finally rose over the Nevada desert, revealing the full extent of the horror they faced. The sky was filled with crystalline shapes, their bodies refracting the morning light into terrible patterns. The breach pulsed like a hungry mouth, spitting out more invaders with each passing moment. But for the first time since this nightmare began, they had hope. It wasn't much, just a small rod of modified metal, but it was a start. Humanity had found its weapon, and the titanium terrors were about to rise. Mary Winters hadn't slept in 3 days. The Pentagon analyst's desk was covered with reports, satellite images, and energy readings from what people were now calling the Nevada incident. Dark circles under her eyes matched the coffee stains on her desk, but she couldn't stop working. Not when she was seeing a pattern no one else had noticed yet. Sir, she called out, grabbing her tablet and running to her supervisor's office. The attacks, they're not random. The crystalline entities had spread beyond the Nevada facility, appearing in smaller numbers across the southwestern United States. But Mary had spotted something in their movements that changed everything. "They're building something," she explained, spreading out her maps. "Each group is positioning itself at specific points. If you connect them," she drew lines between the attack sites, forming a massive geometric pattern. Within an hour, she was presenting her findings to the Joint Chiefs. The creatures weren't just attacking. They were creating a network, preparing for something bigger. Meanwhile, at the front lines, Captain Andrew Phillips was about to test humanity's first real defense against the invaders. His squad was equipped with the newly developed titanium-based weapons, rushing to intercept a group of entities approaching Phoenix, Arizona. "Remember your training," he told his team over the radio as their helicopters approached the target zone. "These T-rifles are different from anything you've used before. The titanium cores need 3 seconds to charge between shots." Below them, the creatures moved like a river of broken glass, consuming everything in their path. They'd grown smarter since Nevada, learning to coordinate their attacks. Regular military units had already pulled back, unable to even slow the advance. "Eagle Squad, you are cleared to engage." The radio crackled. Phillips took aim with his rifle. The weapon was ugly, more like a science project than military hardware. But it was all they had. "Light 'em up." The new weapons worked better than anyone had hoped. Beams of energized titanium particles cut through the crystalline bodies like hot knives through butter. The creatures screamed their glass-breaking screams and tried to retreat. But there was a problem. "They're adapting," shouted Lieutenant Greg Porter through the radio. "The big ones are starting to develop some kind of shell." He was right. The larger entities were growing layers of what looked like dark metal over their crystalline bodies. The titanium weapons still hurt them, but it was taking more shots to bring them down. Back at the hastily established Research Command Center, Dr. Laura Bennett and Engineer Kevin Douglas were already working on a solution. The converted warehouse was filled with the latest equipment, rushed in from labs across the country. "The molecular structure is fascinating," Kevin said, examining readings from the latest attacks. "It's like they're learning from every encounter with our weapons, rebuilding themselves to be stronger." Laura nodded, her mind racing. "But that's their weakness too. Every time they adapt, they have to use more energy. Look at these readings. The ones with the new shells are having to feed more often." Kevin ran his hands through his graying hair, thinking, what if we could overload them? Force them to adapt until they burn out. "We'd need more power than the current rifles can produce," Laura said, "and a better delivery system. What about a suit?" They both turned. In the doorway stood Amy Douglas, Kevin's daughter. At 16, she was technically too young to be in the facility, but after showing complete immunity to the entity's touch during an evacuation, she'd become too valuable to ignore. "Think about it," she continued. "The creatures can't hurt me. If we had suits made of the same titanium alloy as the weapons." Laura and Kevin shared a look. It was crazy, but it might work. Meanwhile, Mary Winters had made another discovery. She burst into the command center, barely stopping to show her credentials. "The pattern," she gasped, pulling up her data. "It's not just a network. It's a resonance web. They're trying to open more breaches." The room erupted into activity. Colonel Murphy, who'd been coordinating the military response since Nevada, immediately called for updated satellite coverage. "How long?" he demanded. "Based on their current rate of expansion." Mary checked her calculations. 72 hours before they can attempt a major breach. If they succeed. She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what more breaches meant. More creatures. More destruction. The end of everything. "How's that suit coming?" Murphy asked Laura and Kevin. "We have an initial design," Kevin said, pulling up the schematics. "But fabrication would take weeks with normal methods." "We don't have weeks," Laura added. "But I have an idea. The entities break down and rebuild matter, right? What if we let them help us?" "Explain," Murphy ordered. Laura pointed to their latest test results. We've been treating their ability to consume and transform matter as a threat. But with the right setup, we could use their own power to forge the titanium alloy we need. Let them do the work for us. It was risky. Insane, even. But they were running out of options. Captain Phillips' team was called back to help with the experiment. They set up a contained area with carefully positioned titanium barriers and lots of raw materials. Then they let one of the smaller entities in. Easy, Phillips muttered, keeping his rifle trained on the creature as it moved through the test chamber. Let it take the bait. The entity did exactly what they hoped. It consumed the materials they'd left out, trying to rebuild itself. But the titanium-laced environment forced it to follow their design instead. In 6 hours, they had their first prototype suit. "It's beautiful," Amy whispered, touching the gleaming metal. The suit looked like liquid moonlight, flowing and organic despite being made of titanium alloy. "It's not just armor," Kevin explained to the gathered officials. "The suit can channel the same energy we use in the rifles, but much more efficiently. And because it's been formed by the entity's own power, it can adapt like they do." Laura finished. Fight fire with fire. They had their weapon. Now they just needed pilots. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. More suits were created using the same process. Volunteers were tested for compatibility, with Amy helping to develop the training program. They couldn't match her natural immunity, but they could teach others to work with the suit's strange new properties. The entities seemed to sense what was coming. They increased their attacks, growing more aggressive. But for the first time, humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were winning. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez scored the first major victory in a suit, taking down a creature the size of a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles. The sight of her titanium-clad form flying through the air, channeling enough power to split the entity into 1,000,000 fading shards, was broadcast around the world. Hope was contagious. With each suit they created, humanity's chances grew stronger. But Mary Winter's pattern was still forming, the deadline getting closer with each passing hour. "We're almost ready for mass production," Kevin reported in the final briefing. "Once the assembly lines are converted." An alarm cut him off. Mary's monitors were flashing red. "They're accelerating the process," she announced, her voice tight. "The pattern. It's already at 70% completion." Laura looked at the data, then at the prototype suits gleaming in their charging stations. "Then we accelerate too," she said firmly. "How many pilots do we have ready?" 12, Phillips answered, "with 30 more in training." Murphy nodded. "It'll have to be enough. Suit up, people. We've got a world to save." Outside, the sun was setting on another day of humanity's fight for survival. But in the growing darkness, new stars were rising. The gleam of titanium suits powering up, preparing for what everyone knew would be the fight of their lives. The reality rippers had changed the rules of reality itself. Now, humanity was about to change them right back. Dr. Patricia Allen stared at her computer screen, hardly believing what she was seeing. After weeks of studying the crystalline entity's energy patterns, she'd found something impossible. They were trying to communicate. "Look at these wave patterns," she said, pointing to her screen as Dr. Laura Bennett leaned over her shoulder. "They're not random at all. It's language." The research lab, once a high school gymnasium in Colorado, had become humanity's main study center for the interdimensional invaders. Titanium barriers lined every wall, keeping them safe from the creatures that still roamed outside. "Can you decode it?" Laura asked, her eyes scanning the complex patterns on the screen. Patricia nodded slowly. "I think I already have. At least partly." She typed a few commands, and the computer began translating the signals. "They're not just trying to destroy us. They're running from something." Before she could explain further, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Colonel Murphy's voice came over the speakers. "All personnel to secure stations. We have a new breach forming." The second breach opened in the Pacific Ocean, 50 miles off the coast of San Francisco. Unlike the Nevada incident, this time they were ready. Titanium-suited pilots were already in the air when the first creatures emerged from the tear in reality. Guardian Squad, engage at will. Captain Andrew Phillips commanded from the lead position. His suit gleamed in the morning sun as he dove toward the writhing mass of crystalline horrors rising from the ocean. But something was different about these entities. They moved with purpose, almost like they were searching for something. And they were speaking. "Dr. Allen," Phillips called through his comm, "we're getting those energy patterns you talked about. Strong ones." In the lab, Patricia rushed to analyze the new data. The patterns were clearer now, almost desperate in their intensity. As her computer processed the signals, words began appearing on her screen. Help, hunger, pursuer, death. They're refugees. Patricia breathed, understanding finally clicking into place. Their whole reality was consumed by something even worse than them. They're not invading. They're looking for a new home. Engineer Kevin Douglas was skeptical. "They have a funny way of showing it," he said, pointing to the feeds showing the destruction around the new breach. "The feeding isn't just destruction," Patricia explained. "It's survival. Their original reality was eaten by something they call the void. They learned to consume matter and energy to survive, but they never learned how to do it without destroying." At that moment, Amy Douglas walked into the lab, drawing everyone's attention. Since the discovery of her immunity, she'd become even more integral to their research. The entities didn't just avoid hurting her. They seemed drawn to her. "Maybe that's why they can't hurt me," she suggested, looking at the translated messages. "I'm not afraid of them. I don't fight back, so they don't need to fight me." Kevin started to protest. It was one thing for his daughter to help with research, another to suggest actively communicating with these things. But Laura cut him off. "She might be right," Laura said. "Every time we fight them, they adapt and become stronger. It's a survival response. But Amy's immunity might offer another way." Outside, the battle over the Pacific was getting worse. The new entities were larger and more complex than the ones from Nevada. Traditional titanium weapons were barely slowing them down. "We need a solution fast," Colonel Murphy growled, watching the feeds. "Those things are heading straight for San Francisco." Patricia looked at Amy, then at her father. "Let me try something," she said. "If we can communicate with them, maybe we can teach them a different way to survive." What happened next would change the course of the war. Under careful supervision, Patricia and Amy approached one of the contained entities in the lab. Instead of attacking, Amy reached out to touch its crystalline surface. The creature froze. Energy patterns erupted around it, more complex than anything they'd seen before. Patricia's computer worked frantically to translate. "Different. Safe. Teach." "They can learn," Amy said softly, her hand still touching the entity. "They just need to understand there's another way." But their breakthrough came with a price. As Patricia decoded more of the entity's language, she discovered the terrible truth about what was coming. The void that had consumed their reality wasn't just following them. It was drawn to the breaches they created. "It's like a cosmic parasite," she explained to the Emergency Council. "It devours entire realities, breaking down the barriers between dimensions. These creatures learn to survive it by becoming like it, but smaller, faster, able to slip between the cracks of reality." "How long do we have?" Murphy asked. Patricia pulled up her calculations. "Based on their messages, months, maybe. The void moves slowly but never stops. Every breach we close buys us time, but as long as any remain open, then we close them all," Laura said firmly, "and find a way to prevent new ones from forming." The research team worked around the clock, combining Patricia's communications breakthrough with their existing titanium technology. They discovered that the entity's ability to reshape matter could be guided, controlled. With Amy's help, they began teaching the more cooperative creatures to work with them, instead of against them. The first success came when they managed to seal a small breach in Arizona. The combined power of humanity's titanium tech and the entity's reality warping abilities proved stronger than the pull of the void between dimensions. But the Pacific breach was another story. It was too big, too powerful to close the same way. And more creatures were still coming through, many of them too damaged or desperate to communicate with. "We need something bigger," Kevin said, looking at the latest designs. "Not just suits, but living weapons," Laura finished. "The entities can merge with and enhance our titanium tech. What if we let them?" The idea was dangerous, unprecedented. Let the creatures merge with their defense systems. Actually invite them to modify their technology. But as Patricia pointed out, they were running out of options. The first test subject was Amy's suit. Under careful monitoring, they allowed one of the communicative entities to merge with the titanium alloy. The result was extraordinary. A suit that was no longer just armor, but a living thing, responding to Amy's thoughts and emotions. "It's not just metal anymore," Amy explained, moving through training exercises with impossible grace. "It's like having another layer of skin, one that can reach between realities." More breakthroughs followed. They learned that the entities could exist symbiotically with their technology, growing stronger without needing to consume and destroy. The suits became more than weapons. They became bridges between two species fighting for survival. But time was running out. The Pacific breach was still growing, and long-range sensors were detecting something massive moving through the void between realities. The void was coming. "We need to mass-produce these new suits," Murphy said, watching Amy demonstrate the enhanced capabilities. "Train more pilots, establish more connections with the friendly entities, and find a way to close that breach," Laura added, "before whatever's out there finds its way to our reality." Patricia looked at her latest translations, messages from the entities that spoke of horrors beyond human understanding. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," she said quietly. "We're fighting for reality itself." Outside the facility, the sun set on another day of humanity's greatest challenge. But now they had understanding to go with their weapons, knowledge to match their courage. The titanium terrors were evolving, becoming something neither human nor entity, but a bridge between worlds. The war for survival had become a race for transformation, with the fate of all realities hanging in the balance. Major Stephen Carter couldn't tell where his body ended and the suit began anymore. The titanium alloy flowed like liquid mercury around him, responding to his thoughts faster than his own muscles. Behind him, 30 other pilots experienced the same strange merger of flesh and living metal. "All units, prepare for drop," he called over the neural link that connected his squad. They hung from the belly of massive transport planes, high above the Pacific breach. Below them, the ocean boiled with interdimensional horrors. The new suits were different from anything they'd used before. After Amy Douglas's breakthrough, the friendly entities had helped upgrade their technology. Each suit was now part machine, part living crystal, and part human consciousness. "Remember your training," Stephen continued. "Let the suits guide you. Don't fight the merger." They dropped like shooting stars, their suits glowing with internal energy. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez, the team's best pilot, took point position. Her suit had adapted more than most, developing crystal formations that looked almost like wings. Contact in 3, 2, 1. The battle that followed would be remembered as humanity's first true offensive against the hostile entities. The enhanced suits cut through the enemy's ranks like hot knives through butter. Where regular titanium weapons had struggled, these living weapons thrived. Back at the command center, Dr. Laura Bennett watched the feeds with a mixture of awe and concern. "The integration is happening faster than we expected," she said to Colonel Murphy. The colonel nodded, his eyes fixed on the screens. "Is that a problem?" "Look at Rodriguez's readings." Laura pointed to a display showing the lieutenant's vital signs. "The suit isn't just responding to her anymore, it's changing her." On the battlefield, Lisa was discovering exactly what that meant. As she dove through a cluster of hostile entities, her suit's crystals began to pulse with new energy. She could feel the power building, not just around her but through her. "Major Carter," she called out. "Something's happening." Before Stephen could respond, Lisa's suit erupted with light. The crystal formations expanded, creating patterns that mirrored the hostile entity's own structures. But instead of consuming everything around her, she was redirecting their energy. "Holy shit," someone whispered over the comm. "She's turning their power against them." Dr. Patricia Allen, monitoring the communications from her lab, suddenly sat up straight. The energy patterns, they're evolving. The suits aren't just copying the entities anymore. They're improving on their abilities. The revelation spread quickly through the command chain. Their weapons weren't just fighting the enemy. They were learning from them, becoming something entirely new. But not everyone was happy about this development. Engineer Kevin Douglas stormed into the monitoring room, waving a tablet of readings. "We need to shut them down," he insisted. "The integration is going too far. We're creating something we can't control." "We can't stop now," Laura argued. "Look at what they're achieving." She was right. The enhanced squad was pushing back the hostile entities with unprecedented success. The Pacific breach, which had resisted all previous attempts to contain it, was actually shrinking. Amy Douglas, watching from her own specially modified suit, understood better than anyone what was happening. "The suits aren't just tools anymore," she explained over the command channel. "They're becoming a bridge between our reality and theirs, a new kind of existence." Stephen was experiencing this transformation firsthand. His suit had developed the ability to phase partially between realities, letting him strike at the hostile entities in their own dimension while remaining anchored in ours. "Rodriguez," he called out, "form up on me. We're going to try something new." Lisa fell into formation with him, their suits resonating on matching frequencies. The crystal formations on their armor began to sync, creating geometric patterns in the air between them. "The energy matrix," Patricia breathed, watching the readings. "They're creating a stable field between realities." The implications were staggering. If they could establish stable fields between dimensions, they might be able to close the breaches permanently. But the cost of this power was becoming clear. In the middle of the battle, Lisa's voice came over the comm, sounding strange and distorted. "I can see it," she whispered. "The void. It's beautiful in a terrible way." "Stay focused, Lieutenant," Stephen ordered, but he could feel it too. The more their suits evolved, the more they could perceive the spaces between realities. The void was out there, vast and hungry, moving steadily toward their dimension. Back at the command center, decisions had to be made quickly. The suits were changing their pilots, turning them into something beyond human. But they were also humanity's best hope for survival. "We continue the program," Colonel Murphy declared finally. "But we add safeguards. No pilot stays merged with their suit for more than 12 hours at a time. Regular psychological evaluations for everyone." Laura nodded, but she knew it might already be too late for such precautions. The transformation had begun, and there would be no going back. In the sky above the Pacific, the battle was reaching its climax. Lisa and Stephen led their squad in a coordinated attack that drove the hostile entities back toward the breach. Their suits moved in perfect synchronization, crystal formations creating complex geometric patterns that distorted the very fabric of reality. "Now," Stephen commanded. 30 enhanced suits focused their power on a single point. The energy built to impossible levels, causing sensors across the Pacific Rim to overload. For a moment, everyone watching thought they could see through the breach, glimpse the infinite void beyond their reality. Then the breach began to close. "It's working," Laura shouted, watching the readings. "The field is stable. They're actually doing it." But as the breach shrank, something came through. Not a crystal entity, but a shadow of something much larger. For just a second, every enhanced pilot felt the touch of the void on their minds. Lisa's scream cut through all communication channels. Her suit's crystals flared with impossible colors as she processed what she'd sensed. "It's not just coming," she gasped. "It's already here. The void. It's been here all along, just sleeping." The revelation hit the command center like a physical blow. Patricia's translations of the entity's warnings suddenly made terrible new sense. They hadn't brought the void to Earth. They'd been fleeing to the last reality it hadn't already infected. All units, return to base, Murphy ordered. We need to regroup and process this new information. As the enhanced squad flew back to base, their suits still humming with power, Stephen looked down at his hands. The titanium alloy moved like mercury under his skin, crystal formations catching the light. They'd won this battle, but the war was about to change dramatically. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the right to exist in any reality. And their weapons, their titanium terrors, were becoming something that neither humanity nor the entities had imagined possible. The uprising had begun. But whether it was humanity rising to face its greatest challenge, or something new rising to replace humanity entirely, remained to be seen. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez floated in the space between realities. Her enhanced suit, now more crystal than metal, let her see things no human was meant to see. The void wasn't just coming, it was everywhere, threaded through all dimensions like a spider's web. Target located, she transmitted back to base. 2 kilometers deep in null space. Major Stephen Carter's voice crackled through her comm. Copy that. Squad, move into formation Delta. The enhanced pilots moved like a school of fish through the strange non-space, their suits leaving trails of light in their wake. After weeks of training, they'd learned to navigate these paths between dimensions, but it never got less strange. Back at command, Dr. Patricia Allen monitored their vital signs with growing concern. Their brain patterns are shifting again, she reported to Colonel Murphy. The deeper they go between realities, the more they change. Can we pull them back? Murphy asked, watching the feeds. I'm not sure they'd come back even if we ordered them to. Patricia admitted. They're hunting something bigger than us now. The hunt had begun 3 days ago, when their sensors detected a massive entity moving through nearby reality spaces. Not one of the crystal refugees, but something older, something that served the void. Amy Douglas, monitoring the mission from her specialized containment suit, could feel the changes in her fellow pilots. They're not losing their humanity, she assured her worried father. They're expanding it, becoming something more. Engineer Kevin Douglas wasn't convinced. The readings from the enhanced suits showed mutations at the cellular level. The pilots were evolving, their bodies adapting to handle powers that should have torn them apart. Movement. Lisa's voice cut through their concerns. Big signature, heading toward reality layer 7. Through her enhanced senses, Lisa could see the target, a vast shape that moved like oil through water, leaving trails of destroyed reality in its wake. It was a void hunter, one of the entities that served the cosmic parasite consuming all existence. All units, weapons hot, Stephen commanded. Remember the plan. We contain it, we study it, we learn how to kill it. The squad moved into attack position, their suits generating fields of distorted space-time. They'd learned this trick from the friendly crystal entities, how to trap something between realities, holding it in a prison of frozen moments. Field generators at maximum, Lisa reported. Her suit's crystals pulsed with power as she helped weave the trap. Ready on your mark. The Void Hunter sensed them coming. It turned in space that wasn't space, revealing a form that hurt to look at. Where the crystal entities were beautiful in their strangeness, this thing was wrong in ways that defied description. Now, Stephen ordered. 30 enhanced pilots fired their weapons at once. Reality itself buckled under the assault. The Void Hunter screamed in frequencies that shattered nearby dimensions, but the trap held. Dr. Laura Bennett, watching through the pilot's feeds, quickly began analyzing the creature. Its structure is similar to the void itself, she reported, but smaller, more focused. Like a piece broke off and gained independence. Can we kill it? Murphy asked. Better, Laura replied. We can learn from it, just like we learned from the crystal entities. The Void Hunter fought against its prison, but the enhanced squad held firm. Their suits had grown too powerful, too strange to be overcome by brute force. Lisa moved closer, her suit's sensors probing the creature's structure. "I can see how it works," she said, her voice distant with concentration. "It's not just destroying reality, it's converting it, changing it into something the void can consume. Like a cosmic digestive system," Patricia added, studying the readings. "The hunters break down reality into something the void can absorb." Stephen's voice came through, tense with effort. "If we understand how it works, we can reverse it," Laura finished. "Use its own power against the void." But studying the hunter came with risks. The closer Lisa got to it, the more she could feel its influence. The void's power called to something deep in her enhanced biology, offering even greater transformation. "Rodriguez, pull back," Stephen ordered, sensing her struggle. "You're getting too close." "I can handle it," Lisa insisted. Her suit's crystals were changing color, absorbing patterns from the hunter. Just a little more data. Suddenly, alarms blared through the command center. Patricia's monitor showed Lisa's vital signs spiking dangerously. "She's merging with it," she shouted. "The suit's trying to adapt to the hunter's energy." "Lisa, stop." Amy's voice cut through the chaos. "Remember who you are. Remember why we fight." For a moment, everything hung in balance. Lisa floated before the imprisoned hunter, her suit pulsing with impossible energies. She could feel the void's promise, power beyond imagination, the ability to reshape reality itself. Then she made her choice. Lisa's suit flared with light as she thrust her consciousness into the hunter's being. But instead of being corrupted, she forced her own will through the connection. The hunter screamed again, but this time in fear. "I see it," she gasped. "I see everything. The void, the hunters, all of it. They're not invincible. They're just hungry. And we can use that." The hunter's form began to break down, not into death but into pure information. Lisa's suit absorbed its knowledge, its power, its very essence. When it was done, she hung in null space, her suit now bearing strange new patterns. "Lieutenant," Stephen called cautiously, "are you still with us?" "I'm here," Lisa replied, her voice stronger than ever. "And I know how to fight them now. The hunters, the void, all of it. We don't just need weapons, we need to become something new, something that can exist in all realities at once." Back at command, the implications of what they'd just witnessed sank in. Their enhanced pilots weren't just fighting the void. They were becoming the next stage in human evolution, a species that could move between realities as easily as walking through a door. "It's happening faster than we expected," Laura said quietly to Murphy. "The merging, the changes, we're creating something that's never existed before." "Is that a good thing?" Murphy asked. "It's the only thing," Patricia answered. "The void is coming. Reality itself is under attack. We need to be ready." In the spaces between dimensions, Lisa led her squad back toward their home reality. But she was different now, changed by her encounter with the hunter. She could see the threads that connected all existence, and she knew what they had to do next. The hunt had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. They hadn't just caught a hunter, they'd learned how to become hunters themselves. But instead of serving the void, they would protect reality itself. As the enhanced squad returned to base, their suits humming with new power, Lisa sent one last message. "The real war is about to begin. And this time, we're hunting them." The day humanity took the fight to the void, the sky above Earth rippled with colors that had no names. 40 enhanced pilots, their suits now more crystal than metal, prepared to make history. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were reality's last defense. Major Stephen Carter looked at his team. Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez stood at his right, her suit patterned with knowledge stolen from the Void Hunter. At his left, Amy Douglas, whose natural immunity had shown them the way forward. Behind them, 37 others, each changed by their merger with the living titanium technology. "Remember the mission," he said through their neural link. We find the void's core, we plant the reality anchors, and we end this war. Dr. Laura Bennett's voice came through their comms from command. The breach is ready. Once you're through, you'll have 6 hours before the power cells burn out. Colonel Murphy added, after that, we can't guarantee we can bring you back. The enhanced squad stood before the carefully constructed breach. Unlike the chaotic tiers the crystal entities had created, this one was precise, engineered with everything they'd learned. It would take them directly to the space between spaces, where the void waited. Squad, sound off, Stephen ordered. One by one, they confirmed their readiness. Each pilot carried part of the reality anchor device, a massive piece of technology that combined human engineering with crystal entity knowledge and power stolen from the Void Hunter. Breach is active, Dr. Patricia Allen announced. Energy signatures are stable. Stephen took a deep breath. Let's go save reality. They stepped through the breach together. The world turned inside out, and then they were there, in the place where reality went to die. The void was beautiful in its terribleness. It stretched in every direction, a living darkness that consumed everything it touched. Reality itself bent and broke around its edges. Multiple contacts, Lisa warned, void hunters approaching from all vectors. They know we're here, Amy added. Her immunity let her sense the void's awareness. It's afraid. Good, Stephen said. Formation Delta. Protect the anchor components. Move out. The battle began immediately. Void hunters, far larger than the one they captured, emerged from the darkness. But the enhanced squad was ready. Their suits, evolved beyond their original design, let them fight in ways the hunters had never seen. Lisa led the first attack wing, her suit's stolen knowledge letting her predict the hunters' movements. Where once these creatures had seemed invincible, now they shattered under concentrated fire from the enhanced weapons. Back on Earth, the command center monitored everything through the pilot's feeds. Engineer Kevin Douglas watched in amazement as his daughter moved through the combat like she'd been born to it. Energy readings are off the scale, Patricia reported. The void is reacting to their presence. The enhanced squad pushed deeper into the darkness, fighting every step of the way. Their suits absorbed damage that should have destroyed them, growing stronger with each encounter. They weren't just surviving in this impossible space, they were thriving. First anchor point located, Stephen announced. Team 1, begin assembly. The reality anchors were humanity's masterpiece, devices that could stabilize space itself, creating points of fixed reality that even the void couldn't consume. They needed to plant 6 of them in a precise pattern. Contact. Lisa's warning came just as the first anchor was activated. A wave of void hunters, larger than any they'd seen, surged toward them. Hold the line, Stephen ordered. We don't stop until all anchors are placed. The battle that followed would have been impossible to describe to anyone who hadn't been there. The enhanced pilots moved between dimensions, their suits channeling power that warped reality itself. Void hunters fell by the dozens, but more kept coming. Second anchor online. Third anchor in position. Fourth anchor activated. With each anchor they planted, the void's reaction grew more violent. The darkness itself seemed to attack them now, trying to consume their suits, their bodies, their very existence. Something's happening, Amy called out. The void, it's changing direction. She was right. As the 5th anchor powered up, the endless darkness began to curl in on itself, pulling away from the points of stable reality they'd created. It's working, Laura's excited voice came through their comms. The anchors are forcing it to collapse into a single point, but the void wouldn't go quietly. As they moved to place the final anchor, it gathered its full power. Reality buckled under the strain. We're losing containment, Patricia warned. The breach is starting to collapse. Lisa, her suit now glowing with absorbed void energy, made a decision. Major, permission to try something crazy. Stephen, fighting off 3 hunters at once, laughed. At this point, Lieutenant, crazy is all we have left. Lisa flew toward the center of the void's collapse, her suit's crystals resonating with stolen power. Amy, I need your immunity pattern. Understanding instantly, Amy linked her suit with Lisa's. The immunity that had first shown them how to fight these creatures combined with the knowledge taken from the hunter. Final anchor in position, Stephen announced. Everyone clear the zone. Lisa and Amy hung in the space between realities, their combined power creating something new. A seed of stable reality right in the void's heart. The anchors powered up to full strength, creating a cage of fixed points around the collapsing darkness. Now, Lisa commanded. The enhanced squad fired everything they had. Reality itself caught fire. The void screamed in frequencies that shattered dimensions. And in the middle of it all, Lisa and Amy's combined power forced order into chaos. For a moment that lasted an eternity, everything stopped. Then the void began to change. The darkness that had threatened all reality transformed, becoming something new. Not destruction, but creation. Holy shit, Stephen breathed. They're not destroying it. They're changing it. The void, trapped by the anchors and transformed by Lisa and Amy's power, collapsed into a single point of infinite potential. Where it had once consumed realities, it now held them together, a linchpin in the structure of existence. Breach is stabilizing, Laura reported from Earth. Whatever you did out there, it worked. The enhanced squad regrouped, their suits battered but intact. They looked different now. Their crystals permanently changed by exposure to the void's power. But they were still human where it counted. Mission accomplished, Stephen said quietly. Let's go home. But they all knew home would never be quite the same. They had changed too much, seen too much. The suits weren't just weapons anymore. They were part of humanity's evolution. Back on Earth, as the enhanced pilots emerged from the breach, Colonel Murphy waited with the research team. The sky above was clear now, free of the reality distortions that had plagued them for so long. The war's over, he said, but Laura shook her head. No, she corrected, watching the pilots' suits shimmer with their new power. It's just beginning. But this time, we're not fighting against the darkness. We're fighting to protect something new. The enhanced squad stood together, their suits glowing softly in the dawn light. They were humanity's titanium terrors no longer. They had become reality's guardians, protectors of all that existed or ever would exist. And somewhere in the spaces between spaces, a point of transformed void power pulsed like a newborn star, proof that even the darkest forces could be changed by human determination, courage, and the power to evolve beyond their limits. The war was over. The real adventure was just beginning.